Dana here, and on this Ask an American, I'm going to be talking about my experience living in a country that has different time zones in it. I'm still a little bit jet lagged after my last trip to the US. I just got back a couple days ago, and so time zones are on my brain. So how many time zones are there actually in the US? Well, the states of the United States of America are spread out in 6 different time zones. The Eastern time zone on the Eastern coast, then the Central time zone, then the Mountain time zone, then the Pacific time zone. And then Alaska is in, what a name, the Alaskan time zone, and Hawaii is in the Hawaiian time zone. I grew up on the East Coast, so I lived in the Eastern time zone. And actually, for most of my life, living in a country that had multiple time zones in it really didn't affect me that much. I do remember that as a kid, when there would be a TV promo for an upcoming show, they would say something like, be sure not to miss such and such show at 9/8 Central on Saturday. And that's how they would phrase it, at 9/8 Central. And that meant that the show would play in the Eastern time zone at 9 and in the Central time zone at 8. And then the Mountain and the Pacific time zones would air the show separately because it would just be too early for those places to air the show at 7 and 6 o'clock. And I would say the next time that I really gave much thought to the fact that the country I lived in had different time zones in it was when I was about 14 and I started getting more interested in political elections. And I learned that the outcome of the election can be changed by the fact that the country has different time zones in it, that outcome can be affected by it. Because when the polls close on the East Coast and those results are announced in the news, the polls on the West Coast are still very much open. And I guess some people on the West Coast or in the other time zones where the polls are still open hear the results from the East Coast and then, I don't know, get kind of like demotivated, or they think, well, I guess my vote doesn't really matter now. They just figure there's no point in going to vote. And so some people who would have voted, perhaps, after hearing the results from the East Coast, maybe decide not to go vote. This can even happen in state elections as well. So there are some states in the US that are split between the time zones. And it has happened that an election occurred and, the polls closed in one half of the state and those results were broadcast. And then the winner won by a very small margin. And then people were saying like, well, maybe it was the fact that the results in half of the state were broadcast and that kind of discouraged people in the other half of the state from even going to vote. And so maybe they say the outcome would have been different if those results from one half of the state hadn't been broadcast until the other half of the state was done voting as well. And living in the US, yes, I grew up on the East Coast, but I did travel from time to time into some of the other time zones, but still, I just would say I didn't really notice the time change that much when I did that. Of course, I had to change my watch or my phone or whatever, but it was just a few hours. I didn't really feel any kind of jet lag, and I was just there for vacation, so it's not like it really affected chatting with my parents or anything like that. But I did really notice the different time zones in the US once more when I moved to Europe. And my parents lived on the East Coast, and so they were 6 hours behind me, but I had a friend who lived in California, and so she was 9 hours behind me. And while I found that it was pretty okay to find a time to chat with my parents 6 hours behind me, it was crazy with my friend in California because she would be waking up and my day would be pretty much coming to a close. And so to find a time to chat, it was just a little bit harder to find time when our schedules lined up with that time change. And also now when I travel back to the US, now my parents live in Colorado, which is in the Mountain time zone. And so now they are 8 hours behind me. Before, when my parents lived on the East Coast, I had a little bit of jet lag when I came back here to Germany, but if I remember correctly, I I don't remember it being so bad. And maybe it's just that, I'm getting older, but I really feel like when my parents lived in Florida and they were just 6 hours behind me, I really remember the jet lag being a lot less extreme than it is now. I know it's just from 6 to 8 hours, but still I really feel like it takes more time and it's a much more extreme adjustment than just the 6 hours from the East Coast. When Mr. German Man and I were dating, I went home back to Florida a few times for Christmas and New Year's. And so of course over New Year's, he was in Germany, I was in the US, so he actually went into the next year before me. And so it was 6 p.m. my time, midnight his time, but then he stayed up on the phone with me or stayed up until 6 a.m. his time to celebrate New Year's with me in the US. So I thought that was pretty sweet. Something else interesting, just as far as time in general goes, so just like Germany, the US does also do daylight savings time. But did you know that the US and Germany switch to summer and winter times on different days? I didn't realize that until I moved here. I just figured everyone probably switch on the same day. This year, for example, the US switched to summertime on March 13th and will switch back to wintertime on November 6th. Whereas in Germany, we switched to summertime on March 27th and we will switch back to wintertime on October 30th. So actually, overall, the US will end up spending this year 21 more days in summertime than here in Germany. So my question for you is, how have different time zones affected you in your life? And please, what is your best cure for jet lag? Please let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't forget to click the like button, and also, if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and for more photos and sometimes other short video clips, you can check me out over here on my Twitter and my Facebook page. Until next time, auf Wiedersehen. They would say something like, don't forget to miss this show. I can remember that as a kid, when there would be a promo for a television show, that's a tongue twister. I'm done.